This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
I would build my team around Ben Simmons. Now, I know Joel Embiid is a very special talent, and there's no doubt that talent-wise, he's one of the best there is in the league. The question for Joel Embiid is about health. Now, I know Ben Simmons is coming off an injury, and now his health is in question to a degree too, but there's been a scope of work as it relates to health injuries for Joel Embiid, and I think that's the main question. Can he remain healthy, and is that sustainable for the next 10 years of a franchise? Where I have a guy like Ben Simmons who, the way he can get people involved in the game, the pace in which he can play at the game, his defensive prowess, which is something that is incredible. I think he's the upper defensive player of the year this year in the league. I will build my team around Ben Simmons. If you're asking me, if it comes down to that, I will go with Ben.
That was on ESPN's Get Up. Jay Williams, the former lottery pick of the Chicago Bulls, Duke University star. I feel like I'm almost surprised it took us this long to get back to this. We haven't had any sports on our television aside from the UFC and Korean baseball and Bundesliga soccer for about, 8 weeks basically. No NBA, no NHL, no Major League Baseball because baseball can't get out of their own way because they're all a bunch of greedy pigs. So what you have a situation is that we all get back to the conversation we've had before. It took us to June 10th, but we're already asking that question again. Should the Sixers build around Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid? Josh Hennig here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. Got a lot to get to today. Dave Weinberg is back in for a Weinberg Wednesday coming up at 1:25. We'll talk some Eagles with Dave, also about could we see MMA and boxing back in Atlantic City soon. We know that Nevada had boxing last night. We know that the UFC has a couple more events coming up this month in Las Vegas. So could that be the pathway for it to return to Atlantic City? We'll get into that and more with Dave coming up at 1:25 for a Weinberg Wednesday. Text board is open at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. But I can't let that slide. I can't let a comment like that on a national platform, on ESPN television, from a guy who most people would believe is good at his job. You may not always agree with Jay Williams, but you have to admit that he's very knowledgeable and he's very well informed when it comes to his job because he talks to a lot of players who are still currently in the game. He talks to a lot of people in and around the NBA still. And he covers the college game. So he's seen Ben and Joel from college to the NBA. And he believes that if push came to shove and the Sixers had to make a decision between Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons moving forward, that he would choose Ben Simmons. And the heavy part of his argument has to do with the fact that Joel Embiid has had injury issues, that he has not always been available, and that he feels, Jay Williams, that Ben Simmons' availability and Ben Simmons' skill set is something that has a long-term benefit and something to build around. Now, this comes on the heels of, if you go to 973ESPN.com, if you haven't already seen it, the pictures that came out of Ben Simmons lifting weights in the offseason, and he looks jacked. I don't know if he has nothing to do except for lifting weights. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe literally his entire life right now in this, shut down COVID-19 world that we live in for 8 weeks was lift weights, play video games, and, dribble the basketball and then eat and go to sleep. Maybe that's all he's doing. But his body at least looks like it. He looks like that he's been putting in serious work lifting up. And with that in mind, I'm just curious about what that means for the Sixers, because the big criticism of Ben Simmons has nothing to do with his conditioning or his strength or his off-season work ethic. It's had to do with what he does in the game. And for Jay Williams to basically come out on ESPN television on the show Get Up and blatantly just say, if I had to pick between the two who I'm going to build my team around, and say it's Ben Simmons, and specifically point to Joel Embiid's injury issues, I have to question this specific question to all of you listening. Are we evaluating Ben Simmons incorrectly? Have we, as observers of basketball and observers of the 76ers, tried to put Ben Simmons into a box, into something he is not? Have we tried to cookie cutter Ben Simmons? Have we expected Ben Simmons to be something that he is not and cannot be? 609-403-0973. Because Jay Williams isn't the first national NBA analyst to mention the idea of, if the Sixers had to, let's say they bring in a new head coach, they still can't get to the NBA Finals, and the team still doesn't make any progress, what do you do next? We've had that conversation many times here on 97.3 ESPN about, okay, let's say the Sixers lose in the second round again when the NBA returns in July, and in the postseason in August, they don't get to the NBA Finals. They ended up just losing in the second round again. And let's assume that means Brett Brown is gone. And let's assume that means you bring in a new head coach. And let's go down the pathway of, well, what if the new head coach doesn't fix anything? What if the new head coach still has a Joel Embiid who can't play at least 75 games in a season, and a Ben Simmons who is not putting up a high number of threes to justify him playing point guard on the Sixers offense? What if the Sixers don't do enough to improve their roster? What if the 76ers don't go out there and bring in a secondary ball handler to play along with these guys? Then what do we do? Then what? Then the next progression is, maybe the issue is these guys shouldn't play together. Maybe these guys can't play together. Maybe their skill sets don't complement each other. Maybe these guys are just not a good fit. And if that's the issue, and we've had numerous teams in NBA history break up all-star duos, right? We've seen it in OKC. Kevin Durant left in free agency. We saw with the Lakers, Shaq and Kobe only lasted so long together after winning NBA championships, and Shaq got traded out of LA. Steve Nash left, got sent out of Dallas, went to Phoenix, even though he and Dirk Nowitzki seemed to have something going there in Dallas. Steve Nash went to Phoenix anyway. We know that there's numerous situations where guys are playing together and eventually the teams break up the duo. So there is precedent in NBA history for two guys, if they can't win a championship together, to break them up. But is it really the right decision to say it should be Simmons instead of Embiid? Because my conflict with this topic is specifically, at what point do we look at Simmons and Embiid and we have just incorrectly casted them on this team and in this offense? And I don't know if this is 100% a Brett Brown issue. I don't know if this is 100% a Sixers organization issue. I don't really know who specifically is at fault for this. But somewhere along the way, we have to admit that, number one, Ben Simmons being the point guard should not be how this team is built. I've been saying that for a while now. I have been convinced of this from every bit of analysis I have heard on this point, to the point where, like I've said before, I'm not convinced anymore that the head coach is the problem as much as it is the players. But if you want to blame the coach, maybe we can blame him for Ben Simmons being a point guard. And maybe you need to institute an offense where Ben Simmons, if he's not willing to be a shooting point guard, then ask him to be a point forward. We see numerous teams do this around the league for years. LeBron James is basically a point forward. He plays on a team with Rajon Rondo. But LeBron James is having an incredible season where he's one of the league leaders in assists. Scottie Pippen was a point forward in the Bulls triangle offense. Grant Hill was a point forward in Detroit with the Pistons back in the late 90s. Draymond Green is doing the same thing in Golden State, where he is a ball handler in the Warriors offense. We've seen numerous times where there's more than one ball handler on a team. So is part of the problem that Brett Brown is trying to make Ben Simmons the primary ball handler when he shouldn't be the primary ball handler? That's the first question. The second question I have is, if there really is a problem with Embiid being the centerpiece of the Sixers organization, is it just the injuries or is it something else? Because I'm very curious about, have we also typecasted Joel Embiid? How many times have we heard an analyst or a caller or a texter or somebody on a radio show here on 97.3 ESPN, we've heard a lot of people say it. Joel Embiid needs to get in the post. Joel Embiid needs to stop shooting threes. Joel needs to get his butt in the post and bang with the big boys. He's a better post player. He shouldn't be shooting from the outside. So if we typecasted Joel Embiid too, are we trying to make Joel Embiid something that he is not? Joel Embiid is averaging 30 minutes per game for his career. His career high in minutes per game was 33.7 last year. He's never played more than 64 games in a season. Is he phenomenally talented? Incredibly so. Does he have a high ceiling? Absolutely. Has he only been playing basketball for about 10 years of his life, basically? Yes. So at what point do we have to ask the question, have we cast Joel Embiid incorrectly? I get it, he's phenomenally talented, and I get he's a phenomenal star, and he's a three-time All-Star, and he's a guy who goes out there and averages the triple-double each of the last 3 seasons, and he gets almost 2 blocks per game 2 of the last 3 years. He's also a pretty good free throw shooter for a big guy. This year he's shooting 81% from the free throw line. That's incredible for a 7-foot-tall big man. By the way, he's also improved his three-point shooting this year. He's shooting almost 35% from 3. But is he really the guy you want to build your team around? Is he really a franchise-level centerpiece? Is he really deserving of being talked about among the best players in the league? All these questions about Embiid and Simmons, I think, are valid. Because if people are asking the questions, if people are not settling for answers, I think we're going to more quickly find our way to the correct answer, especially when the NBA returns next month. When the NBA is having their training camps and then their 8-game run to the postseason and then the playoffs, and when the Sixers are out there and they're playing all these teams and we see jacked up swole Ben and then Joel throwing up his hands in the air and we see all the stuff that goes on with the Sixers, we have to ask the honest questions. Have we cast Embiid and Simmons incorrectly? Are we asking them to do things that are not their skill set? Are the 76ers as a team doing enough to emphasize these 2 all-star skill sets? Is the team built around them the best equipped to complement Joel and Ben? Can Joel and Ben complement each other? How much of this is the head coach and how much of this is the players just not getting the job done? 609-403-0973 is the text board. We got to ask these questions because at some point we have to understand that the NBA has evolved. At some point, we have to understand that maybe our perception of the Sixers and their problems are maybe not what we originally thought they were. How much of the Sixers' problems has to do with the fact that they're on their third GM, that the process was quote-unquote interrupted, that Brian Colangelo was forced on this organization? How much did that change the direction of things? How much of it on the organization is that Elton Brand is completely having to correct course on everything that Colangelo did? I mean, for goodness sake, Colangelo signed Jared Bayless. That did nothing for this organization. Not even one iota. You draft all these guys high in the first round. You take multiple shots at the first round to get superstars. Now you got two bona fide all-stars. Joel Embiid, most people believe, is a top 10 player in the league, and most people believe Ben Simmons is a top 25 player. So if we go off of that, and you have these two talented players, but we're frustrated with the Sixers' results, we're frustrated with a lot of things, Joel staying healthy, Ben Simmons not shooting, the efficiency of the offense, how the team is constructed, where does the blame really go? How much of it is the players? How much of it is the front office? How much of it is the coaching staff? How much of it is these players have been miscast? Have we asked Joel and Ben to be something that they are not? 609-403-0973 is the text board to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Texter chimes in and says, it's clearly the entire NBA. Superstars move from team to team more than any other sport. We can't expect Ben and Joel to really stay together forever. I think it's a fair point to bring up. I don't know if it's 100% the same as you're talking about that, because a lot of times when players leave teams, whether it's LeBron for Miami or Carmelo Anthony, forcing his way to go to New York from Denver, or if it's, a guy like Shaq forcing his way out of LA because he told the Lakers to choose between him and Kobe, or, we saw the huge trade of Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen get traded to the Celtics and make their big three. There's a lot of variables that go into player movement. So I agree with it that NBA superstars move more than any other sport. But I don't know if all of those situations we've seen in the past are the same as the Sixers, because the Sixers does feel uniquely different, does it not? Doesn't it feel like the Sixers, we try to make analogies. We try to say what it could be like. But frankly, I don't think we've ever seen anything like Ben and Joel before. I think that's part of the problem why we have all these questions, and that is there's not 100% identical or apples to apples precedent for what the Sixers are dealing with. The whole Sixers process, using that word again, to get from where they were 8 years ago to now has been very unique. And Ben and Joel are very unique talents that came out of that whole tanking to get the high draft picks, putting yourself in a position to get the best players possible in the draft. And you walk away with a big man who's phenomenally talented, but is averaging 30 minutes per game in his career and hasn't played more than 64 regular season games. And then you have a guy in Ben, who, unlike Joel, is available almost all the time, plays a lot of minutes, but unlike Joel, doesn't shoot. Joel will shoot threes. Joel's a very good free throw shooter. Ben is not those things. So what then? 609-403-0973 is the text for Tom in the Village chimes in and says, I kind of blame the top brass. You have a coach that wants that quick pass, live or die by the three type offense, and you bring in players that are better playing inside the 3-point line. That's Tom from the Villas. Yeah, look, you bring up a good point, Tom. There is something to be said for the fact that the Sixers, as constructed, may not be the best equipped to win a championship. As constructed, this team does not fit some of the skill sets of Ben and Joel, doesn't fit the kind of offense that the Sixers want to run. And by the way, you signed Tobias Harris to that big contract as well, and has he really lived up to those expectations? Has he really been the outside shooting threat that you needed? Not really. He's been inconsistent. He's had very good stretches at times. When Ben and Joel had down nights, Tobias has stepped up and played well. So it's not as if he can't play well. But like you said, the front office, Tom, and from the Villas. At what point do we got to hold Elton Brand responsible for this team? He's the one who went out and traded the assets for Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris. And we could potentially be 2 years removed from all of that and be no better off for it. Yeah, you go in 7 games with the Raptors last year, but at what point are we going to move on? At what point are we going to realize we lost? Oh, well, if the balance would have gone this way or that way, the Sixers could... There's no guarantee. What we do know is that Jimmy Butler is no longer here. Josh Richardson is a nice player, but not an incredible complement to what the Sixers want to do. I think in some ways, the Al Horford experiment has not worked out. The Sixers bench needed the additions of Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson III to really revamp themselves and pick up. It might just be the point in time where maybe the conversation needs to be had. Who do you build around moving forward? Maybe on June 10th, us having that conversation doesn't seem so foreign anymore. Maybe this idea that the Sixers have to pick and choose how they're going to build their roster needs to be brought up and needs to be considered and needs to be having a long-form conversation that maybe we didn't want to have previously. All right, text board is open, 609-403-0973. I'm Josh Hennig here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up, Dave Weinberg, longtime veteran Eagles writer, also longtime boxing and MMA writer covering the sport in Atlantic City. We'll get into the Eagles, the return of potentially MMA and boxing to Atlantic City, what it would take to actually do that, plus his thoughts on everything going on in the sports world. Coming up next, it's a Weinberg Wednesday with me, Josh Hennig, here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hennig back here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your text in just a bit at 609-403-0973. But now, as we do each and every Wednesday, it's a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. You can check out Dave Weinberg's Extra Points columns each week at 97.3ESPN.com. Dave, veteran Eagles, as well as boxing and MMA writer, joining us now on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. We got a lot to get to with Dave here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, welcome back. How you doing today?
Doing well. I'm a little windblown, but other than that, I'm okay.
Well, you'd rather be windblown than other things, right?
That's true. That's true.
Dave, I wanted to start with the Eagles because, of course, the news came out a little bit earlier this week that, Carson Wentz, he's got Jalen Reagor, he brought in Marquise Goodwin, he got J-Jaw down there in Texas to work out with him. Should we be encouraged by that? Can we read anything into that? Because we know the last time he worked out with a bunch of receivers, it was in North Dakota, and that was 2017.
Yeah, they pretty much do it every year. They find a way to bring all the guys to a location. It's just as much about bonding as it is about working out and stuff. Russell Wilson has been known to do it every year, and just a chance for Carson Wentz to just get to know some of the new guys, reacquaint himself with the guys who are coming back, and trying to form that rapport that is so necessary when you're an NFL quarterback and on the offense. So he's I'm encouraged by it. It's good to see. I mean, because especially this year with the lack of mini camps and all that kind of OTAs and stuff, that the more time that he can get together with those guys, the better off he's going to be once training camp rolls around.
I think the other thing that encourages me as well, Dave, is the fact that people overlook the fact that he did have a couple of those off seasons where he was coming off of some serious injuries, so he didn't really have the offseason to work out with guys as much, whereas him working out now shows that he is healthy, and a healthy Wentz is always a good thing for the Eagles.
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh. So, yeah, he missed out the 2018 offseason with his knee injury, and again with the neck problem. So, it's encouraging the fact that he is. It does show that he's healthy, can hit the ground running, so to speak, once training camp starts, rolls around. So, the more time he has to prepare a full off season, as much as he can to be able to show what he can do once training camp and the season rolls around. That's an encouraging sign.
The other thing that stands out to me with the Eagles, Dave, especially on the offensive side, is that one of the things people forget is after 2017, the Eagles have scored less points per game than they did the Super Bowl year. That Super Bowl year, they were a top offense in the league, and then they lost Frank Reich, they lost John DeFilippo. They went down by, I believe it was 6 points per game the next year. They get a little bit more back last year, but now you shake up the coaching staff a little bit, as Doug Peterson did. You bring in some new wide receivers. Is there genuine hope that this offense can get back to what it was when they won the Super Bowl?
Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, when you lose like Frank Reich and those kind of guys, they're pretty much, they're as good as it gets when it comes to being, offensive minds. I think the fact that they added Marty Mornhinweg is really going to help. Marty's a very creative guy, knows how to make the most out of all, the offensive talent that they have. Plus, I think Doug I think he's one of the better coaches in the NFL as well, as we've discussed before. So, yeah, I guess it's just gonna depend on how the newcomers, fare once they get on the field. Jalen Reagor has all the talent in the world, but until he actually gets out there, it remains to be seen. What's going to happen to Hassan Jackson, injury history, running backs. I think they're going to be a little bit better now that they have everybody back healthy. So, except for Jordan Howard, of course. But I just think that I think the talent is there to become a more dynamic and more productive offense. We'll just have to wait and see.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Dave, before we get to a couple other things, I wanted your perspective on something else outside of the Eagles, and that is, it feels like in the sports world overall, we know that, MMA and boxing is going on in Vegas. We know that the NBA and the NHL is training to come back. We know the NFL is pretty much full steam ahead for their season. Mm-hmm. But is it just me, or does it feel like baseball is completely tone deaf right now?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure what they're thinking. It just seems like, either side, neither one wants to give an inch. They both insist on having it their way. You would think that they'd be able, by this point, to kind of reach an understanding and meet in the middle somewhere. Just because the longer they do without baseball, the more people are going to get used to not having it. It's going to be that much more difficult to get the fan base back. I mean, it was declining as it was even before the pandemic hit. So it's I just think it's imperative. They're really hurting the game. They're hurting themselves the longer they stay, and they just have to find a way. I mean, I'm a huge baseball fan. It's the sport I grew up on, and I miss it. But I'm just hoping that they're going to find a way to salvage some part of this season.
Why do you think that then baseball seems to be so unwilling to work on their perception? Because, perception in many ways is reality. People think you are something, then you are that, whether it's true or not. And listen, you know Mike Trout, you've covered him. You know how good of a great a human being he is. We know he's not a greedy, selfish person, but the perception right now is that the owners and the players are just walking around saying, I want money. But we know that the people involved in this, especially some of these players who are great human beings, are not that kind of people. So how does baseball fix this perception?
That's a good point and a good question. I don't know how. I guess they're just going to have to find a way to endear themselves to the younger fans, which is something that I think they've been struggling with in recent years. Like I mentioned, I'm a huge baseball fan, but I'm also part of that generation. They grew up on the sport, whereas the younger people, so-called younger people, they're not really as addicted to the sport, I guess, if you will, as there's other options out there. The games are not particularly fast-paced. So they find other ways to spend their time. They don't want to sit 3 hours and watch a game. So I think once they get on the field, they have to find a way to speed up the game, to make it more fan friendly. And I think they've done that to some degree. I mean, you do see like the Mike Trouts and the Max Scherzers and those guys, having catch with young fans in the stands between innings, that kind of thing, which I think will help. But there is that image that it's kind of like the game is almost like pass people by. They'd rather do some other stuff with their time. And that's the thing that they really have to work on fixing.
Dave Weinberg on a Weinberg Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave also has covered boxing and MMA in Atlantic City for years, boxing Hall of Fame writer. And Dave, we saw last night Shakur Stevenson, he just crushed his opponent in Vegas last night. But we're now seeing that, Vegas is the next step in the direction. We saw the UFC, they were in Jacksonville, then the UFC went back to Vegas. Now we see boxing in Vegas. Is there now a pathway for boxing and MMA to return to Atlantic City based on what we're seeing in Vegas?
Well, I've spoken to a number of people involved in the industry in Atlantic City. Rob Haydack from Cage Fury being one of them. Some other guys in the boxing end of things. Even spoke with Nick Lembo from the New Jersey Athletic Control Board. And the format is in place to bring both boxing and MMA back to Atlantic City. It's just a matter of when the governor okays it. They do have the safeguards in place, many of the safeguards in place that MMA has shown and what Tom Frank showed last night. The main problem, not the main problem, but one of the main stumbling blocks, I guess, is to find a place to put these events. Hard Rock has a long-standing and great relationship with Cage Fury, but as Rob kind of pointed out, they may not be so willing to bring back the sport if there's no fans in the stands, because casinos, after all, are dependent upon the customers that go to the casinos after the events. Same thing with concerts. So I think when MMA and boxing return, you're probably going to see some non-casino properties hosting the first few events, at least, because there will be no fans. That's probably pretty much a given. So I would look to like the Claridge or the Showboat, which have both hosted both MMA and boxing events in the past. They have the venues there that they'll be suited to those sports. So I get they're just waiting on Governor Murphy to give the okay, because from what I've been told, speaking to these guys, they have all the safeguards and everything in place to be able to bring those sports back to Atlantic City once they get the go ahead.
It's very interesting you brought up the casinos and the fans, Dave, because one of the things that's been brought up a lot about the sports coming back is the TV contracts. The UFC has a TV contract, Top Rank has a TV contract, the NBA, NHL, they all have these TV contracts. But you're talking about some maybe smaller promotions that don't have the millions or even billions of dollars coming in from TV. So how important is it that not having fans in the stands impacting their bottom lines?
Yeah, it's a big drawback. I mean, Cage Fury has a working relationship with UFC Fight Pass, so they get their share of fans. And Top Rank hosted a card in Atlantic City just before the pandemic hit. So and they have that working relationship with ESPN. But you're right, like some of the smaller guys, like the Ring of Combats, some of the smaller local boxing outfits, they don't have that advantage of getting that TV money. You're right. So they're really relying upon spectators to kind of help them cover their costs. And when you don't have that, then naturally you're gonna feel the brunt. So I guess they're gonna have to find a way to just bring the sport back, kind of bite the bullet for a little bit, and then hopefully some of the bigger outfits will come and some of the casinos will be able to, once they can figure out how to safely entertain customers again, then you'll see even more events, I think, come back, and besides the non-casino hotels.
Dave, how much also does the fact that where we are in the country, the fact that the Northeast was hit very hard by the pandemic, the fact that some other parts of the country were not affected and they're having different fluctuations, how much does where we are situated impacting all this discussion?
Yeah, that's a good point also, especially with New Jersey. although I would argue that North Jersey probably has felt the brunt more from COVID-19 than we have. But yeah, that's a real concern. And you've noticed like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, no other Northeast states kind of take a more conservative approach to bringing things back to so-called normal. And otherwise, places like Nevada, Arizona, California, Florida, they've been able to take a different approach, I guess. Their governors were more willing to bring things back. So, I think that is a factor. The fact that, Governor Murphy has taken a more conservative approach, I guess, if you will.
Is Atlantic City really the only place with the infrastructure to really pull off these kind of events right now? Because we know that other places in South Jersey, they have arenas, they have, hotels, but is Atlantic City really, because of the fact that you probably need a bubble environment, the most ideal?
Yeah, it always has been. There have been other venues that have hosted events in the past. Specifically, I remember at Wildwood Convention Center, which is that's pretty well suited to host those kind of things. But the former Wildwood fighter Chuck Masacchio held a couple shows there. Main events based in North Jersey. They had a couple shows there back a long time ago now in the 1980s or 90s, I guess. And I know West Deptford, they hosted one or two shows. There's a place there that is capable of doing it. But Atlantic City is that is the fight capital, if not the world anymore, but certainly in New Jersey. And, that's unless you want to go up to North Jersey to some of those arenas. But talking like South Jersey specifically, this is probably the most suitable. Although I will say maybe the one consideration would be like an outdoor event. Bader Field would be a possibility, I guess. I know that the racetrack in Millville, Thomas Lamont and Rising Star, they hosted an event there, a boxing card there a few years ago. So maybe the outdoor venue would be the way to go. I mean, supposedly it's a safer place to hold these kind of events. You're allowed to hold more people in outdoor venues as opposed to indoor. So maybe that's a possibility. I don't know.
Dave, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about a little bit of the boxing news that did come out today. According to reports, Tyson Fury has agreed on financial terms or a 2-fight deal with Anthony Joshua in 2021. So is there a thumbs up for that, or did you want to see another Wilder fight? Like, how do you feel about a Fury-Joshua showdown?
That'll be incredible, especially if it's held over in Europe. I mean, that's going to draw, 120,000, 150,000 people. I don't think much of Joshua personally as a fighter. I think Tyson will probably roll through him pretty easily. I personally would rather see another Wilder rematch, but I can understand the fact that it'll be a hugely popular event with the British boxing public, which is a huge fan base. So I'm not surprised that they would do that.
You mentioned the British boxing public. Is it fair to assume that the Fury-Joshua card would probably be an international card and not a U.S. card?
Yeah, that's fair to assume. I mean, you probably have some U.S. players there. Top Rank will probably bring some of their people there to it. But, I would say generally, boxing in England and elsewhere in Britain is a huge sport, probably second to soccer as far as popularity goes. And I saw it firsthand whenever a British fighter would come over to fight in Atlantic City, the fans that they brought with them were just tremendous, big crowds, enthusiastic, and really added another element of energy to any event that was in Atlantic City. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll probably focus on some of the more local fighters there.
He is Dave Weinberg. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Check out his latest Extra Points column coming out later today about the return of boxing and MMA potentially to Atlantic City. And he joins us each and every week for a Weinberg Wednesday right here on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, appreciate the time. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Back to your text messages coming up next, 609 403-0973 to get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Welcome back to the warm-up here on 97.3 ESPN. Back to your text messages in just a moment, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation, thanks again to Dave Weinberg. He joins us each and every Wednesday for a Weinberg Wednesday. Great insight on the Eagles. Always enjoy Dave's perspective as well in the boxing and MMA world because, let's be realistic, someone like Dave, you cover the sport as long as he has, and he has these unique special insights. Like I didn't know about, the boxing, British boxing fans that flooded Atlantic City years ago. I wasn't aware of how impactful that was. Dave has these insights that, a lot of us may not know about. So I always appreciate Dave joining us, giving us his insights and his takes on things each and every Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Mine are coming up on the Sports Bash. Mike Gill, Hunter Brody. They got Jason Fitz, ESPN radio host, joining them at 3 p.m. Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com with Jeff Mosher coming up at 4 p.m. And Yahoo Sports NBA reporter Keith Smith joins the guys coming up at 5:30, the latest on the NBA. Back to the NBA talk right here at 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT chimes in and says, when the Sixers win the NBA title this year, all the experts will complain. It's tough winning 50-plus games every year. Well, Dan, first of all, if the Sixers win a title this year, based on everything I said earlier, that means they answered all the questions. If they won an NBA title, heck, if they got to an NBA Finals, I think that answers a lot of questions, period. Because part of the issues that we're having with the Sixers, Danny HT, is that it's not that they can't win a championship or they don't have talent. It's that they have all this talent that has not been realized. We know what kind of ceiling Ben and Joel have, but it's how long is it going to take for them to get to their potential, to reach that level of success and excellence. That's where the rub is, man. The rub is how long is it going to take for these guys to get to that level of success? Now, if they won an NBA title or got to the NBA Finals this year, that answers a lot of questions about Ben and Joel and Elton Brand, but it also, for you Brett Brown haters, answers the Brett Brown questions. Can Brett Brown win a championship with this team? If they got to an NBA Finals, the question is they do have a chance to win with Brett Brown, which means he's probably going to stay the head coach, which I know would infuriate a lot of you out there. Back to the text board, 609-403-0973. Mike in the Villas chimes in and says, with Shake at the point, the Sixers might be harder to beat. I think the Sixers might be a little tougher with Shake Milton at the point instead of Ben Simmons. Interesting point. We talked about this previously about the Sixers starting lineup, Mike from the Villas, about the fact of this is a lineup that has never played together. We have never seen the lineup of Shake, Josh Richardson, Tobias, Ben, and Joel. I would even go as far to say, in my opinion, and I mentioned this previously here on the show, I wouldn't even start Josh Richardson. I would have my starting lineup, and I would go 8 games just to get them cohesion when they come back to the league, that 8-game run they're going to have. I would have my lineup be Shake, Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid. You're not a team that scores a lot of points. It's not your prerequisite. It's not what you do best. So why not emphasize something you can do well? Go out there, play defense, put a bunch of freak athletes on the floor, and then let your bench have this scoring punch of Horford, Richardson, Trey Burke, Glenn Robinson III, Mike Scott. That would be your bench starting lineup, and that's an opportunity for you to go out there and say, listen, we're not going to try to outscore everybody, but we know that Matisse Thybulle can guard the other team's best wing player. We know Matisse can guard guys like Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, and Chris Middleton with the Bucks. We know he can guard guys like Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward with the Celtics. We know he can go out there and guard guys like Goran Dragic and give Jimmy Butler some trouble as well on the perimeter. We know he can also get in the face of a lot of the shooters that Miami Heat have. He can be a defensive player against the starters. Now you're bringing in these guys who we know they can shoot and score, like Burke, Robinson III. You have Josh Richardson and Al Horford all coming off the bench. I think that's what you should do. That's the punch you should have coming off the bench. Your goal should be to outscore the other team's bench every time they come in the lineup. And if you play great defense with the starters, you have a chance to win. I like the idea of Shake being the secondary ball handler with Ben. I just don't know what that'll look like. I like the text, Mike, for the Villas. I like the fact that you're thinking outside the box. I just don't know what that'll look like. I don't know how good of a team or an offense or how efficient that will be, because one of the things that Ben and Joel need are floor spacers. They need guys to pass to when they get double teamed. So when Ben's driving to the paint and they clog the paint, who's he going to pass to on the outside? When Joel gets double teamed, who's he going to pass to, whether it's across court or popping up out of the post? And that's always been the question. You know, when they had J.J. Redick and Jimmy Butler, we knew who you could pass to because Butler can create his own shot off the dribble, and J.J.'s a spot-up gunner. You don't have that sharp shooting gunner anymore. Shake Milton can hit threes, but he's not a high-level three-point shooter. He can get his own shot off the dribble. Matisse Thybulle, you're not really looking for him for offense. If he hits a three here or there, or if he scores a little bit, great. But you're looking for him right now to be great defensively. You need Tobias Harris to step up and hit those threes. You brought him in here to be that third guy to complement Ben and Joel. You need him to step up 100%. By the way, one more thing on the Sixers. And I mean this in all sincerity. If the day came that Brett Brown gets fired, you got to go out and get a new head coach. Who the heck is that coach going to be, by the way? I mean, Mark Jackson was fired from Golden State and hasn't been hired for a job since. Meanwhile, Stan Van Gundy has had several different jobs, and he hasn't done anything since he left Orlando. Who are you going to hire? Sam Cassell's an assistant on Doc Rivers' staff. He knows Elton Brand. Maybe he's the guy.